They thought he was going to thank his wife. After all, she had been in every magazine cover beside him, smiled through 5 years of charity galas, and wore his last name like it was part of the brand. The tux was hers. The after-party was hers. The camera angles, her idea. But when Cian Rose stepped up to the microphone, holding the Astra Award that symbolized a lifetime of influence, he didn't thank Raina. He pointed to someone else. And the room froze. Have you ever watched someone lose everything without moving a muscle? Have you ever stood in front of the world and smiled while someone else was credited for the life you helped build? Or worse, have you ever seen someone quietly leave, only to be named everything you never were? That night was supposed to celebrate Tian Rou, Silicon Valley's golden architect. He'd rebuilt the future after the 2019 cybercrash, designed smart security networks used in over 40 countries, built a $9 billion empire that couldn't be hacked. And beside him, perfectly styled in gold and frost-white satin, was Raina Rou, his wife. She wasn't just a +1. She was the symbol of stability, the woman who had never missed a camera flash, never let her eyeliner smear, never spoken out of turn. She had managed his image like a PR team wrapped in Cartier. So when the lights dimmed and the tribute video played, when the voiceover praised his vision, his resilience and his leadership, everyone expected his closing speech to end with her name. Instead, he spoke of someone else. The woman behind my success isn't the one you think. And when he said her name, Seraphine Lane, cameras turned. Raina didn't. She just sat there, a wine glass suspended halfway to her lips, eyes still fixed on the stage. But her heart had already fallen through the floor. Stay with me, because this story isn't about the scandal. It's about the silence that came after, the kind of silence only real love, or betrayal, can leave behind. The ballroom, at the Avalon Grand, shimmered in gold-trimmed light, every table draped in jet-black velvet, 160 chairs, each with a nameplate, a vintage menu, and an embossed program listing Cian Rou's achievements across 3 continents. Raina walked in alone. Not because Tian wasn't there, but because that was the brand. She arrived first, glowing like the crown jewel. He would follow. It kept the cameras hungry. Her dress, hand-cut in Florence. Her heels, one-of-a-kind Louboutin prototypes. Everything about her said, he chose me. And for 5 years, he did. They weren't in love. But they didn't need to be. Not in public, not on paper. They were a fortress of mutual benefit. She protected his image. He gave her access to a world most people only dream of. Tian wasn't a loud man. He didn't give keynote speeches unless paid, didn't do podcasts, didn't overshare. He liked logic, structure, clean lines. What he didn't like, emotion. That's why Raina worked. She never pushed. She performed. And tonight was her biggest performance yet. She had booked the front row, picked the tux, arranged the floral scent used to mist the room. Everything was in place, until the teleprompter changed. Tian stood behind the curtains in a black-on-black tux, one hand in his pocket, the other holding the award plaque he was about to be handed. He wasn't breathing easy, because tonight, he wasn't reading the lines she rehearsed. He had edited the speech 1 hour ago, quietly, alone. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a decision. They called him the architect of power, but for a long time, Tian Rou was just a broke engineer in a basement trying to stop servers from catching fire. And the only person who stayed up with him in those 3 a.m. failures wasn't Raina. It was her, Seraphine Lane, the quiet woman who ate saltines for dinner and coded without needing applause. The woman who once left him a note that said, "Keep going, you were built for more than applause." And that note was still in his desk drawer. When the presenter called his name, Tian walked on stage like nothing had changed. Except everything had. He took the mic, cleared his throat, and instead of the line Raina wrote, "To my wife, my mirror, my strength," he said, "Some people build your future long before the spotlight ever finds you. Some work in silence, and carry you without asking for thanks. The woman behind my success is Seraphine Lane. Raina didn't flinch, but her fingers gripped the stem of her glass like a threat. Photographers turned toward her. One flashed, just as the corner of her mouth curved. Not in pain. In calculation. She knew what this meant. Not just betrayal, but exposure. Everything she had helped him protect, the brand, the stability, the fantasy, he just broke it in 12 words. Tian didn't look back as he walked off stage. He didn't look at Raina. He looked past the cameras, past the media tables, toward the back, where a woman with a plain navy dress and soft eyes sat frozen, still unsure whether to stand or disappear. And in the shadows of the biggest night of his career, Tian Rose stepped off the stage and walked straight past his wife, toward the woman no one saw coming. The ballroom was still humming when Tian disappeared. Guests whispered. Phones buzzed. The PR team panicked. Raina stood up slowly. Her smile stayed frozen in place, sculpted and camera-ready. "Mrs. Rowe, would you like to say a few words?" She turned slightly toward the reporter, her voice calm. "I'm feeling a bit lightheaded," she said. "Just champagne and nerves. I think I'll step out." She didn't blink. She didn't shout. She didn't follow him. Instead, she walked out of the ballroom like a queen who already knew the kingdom would burn, but planned to light the fire herself. The doors closed behind her, and in the hallway, where no one was watching, she finally breathed out, one long measured exhale. Then she took off her heels and walked barefoot to the car. Upstairs in the penthouse suite, the after-party setup waited untouched. Caviar, rose arrangements, vintage playlists looping. Raina walked in, shut the door, and stood still. She looked around at the room she decorated, the crystal flutes lined in a perfect row, the plaques lined along the fireplace. Everything staged, everything perfect. She walked over to the bar, poured herself a drink, and then hurled the glass at the far wall. It shattered like her composure. Then she picked up a lamp, a $22,000 glass-burst designer lamp, and slammed it to the floor. No screaming, no tears. She just stood in the silence, chest rising, then falling, then still. Tian didn't come home that night. He wasn't answering calls. His assistant said he left the event early, but Raina didn't need confirmation. She already knew where he went. Seraphine Lane. That name rang in her head like a dull siren. She'd heard it before. Once, long ago, a ghost buried in a spreadsheet footnote during the early merger days. A contract name on an old consulting project. Raina remembered asking, "Who's this?" And Tian's voice calm, "Someone who helped in the early days. Doesn't matter." She never asked again. But now, that name was in headlines. Across the city, Tian stood on a familiar doorstep. Palo Alto, a quiet street, one porch light flickering. He raised his hand to knock, then paused. He hadn't been here in over 6 years, not since he walked away. But somehow, everything still looked the same. Same garden light by the stairs, same chipped tile near the welcome mat. He knocked once, then again. She opened the door slowly. Seraphine. She looked at him, eyes unreadable. Neither of them spoke. Not for 5 long seconds. Then she stepped aside and let him in. Inside, the house was small, lived in, clean, but not polished. Couches with soft corners, old rug under the coffee table, a bookshelf filled with systems theory and historical architecture. He remembered that shelf, and the paint chip on the corner of the floor lamp. He stood awkwardly near the doorway. She walked to the kitchen, boiled water, her back to him the whole time. The kettle hissed softly. 2 cups. No words. She handed him one. He took it. They sat across from each other. "You didn't have to say my name," she said. Her voice wasn't cold, just flat, controlled. He looked down. "I did." She sipped her tea. He watched her, searching for anger. But Seraphine wasn't loud like Raina. She never had been. That was what made her dangerous. She didn't yell. She just left. And when she did, the silence stayed longer than the pain. "Why now?" she asked quietly. He leaned back in the chair. His voice was lower than usual, almost human. "Because I've spent 5 years living in a house built on performance." She looked at him, still waiting. He shook his head. "I married Raina to stabilize the company, to pass optics tests. The board liked her, the media loved her. But—" he paused. "She never knew what it meant to build something real. She only knew how to curate it." Seraphine said nothing. "Everything I built, every server, every protocol, every idea that scaled. You touched it first." She didn't argue, didn't soften. He went on. "I kept thinking success meant moving forward, moving fast, scaling bigger. But somewhere in that rush, I forgot the only version of me that ever made sense was the one in that basement, with you." She exhaled, slow. "Don't come here just because the lights got too bright." His voice cracked for the first time all night. "I didn't come because it's dark. I came because it's honest." The air between them thickened. Still, no tears, no dramatic reunion, no fireworks, just stillness. Then she stood and walked to the shelf, pulled down a small framed sticky note, faded now. She handed it to him. He looked at it. His own handwriting, years ago. "Fix by morning or we lose the whole system, don't give up. See." And under that, in her writing, "Keep going. You were built for more than applause." He stared at it. "I kept this," she said, "because it reminded me of a version of you I believed in, a version that didn't need to perform." He lowered his head. "I lost him," he whispered. She paused. Then rebuild him." Outside, the world kept spinning. The media speculated. The headlines screamed. But in that living room, in the soft lamp glow and the faded sticky note between them, something quiet began to shift. Not forgiveness, not romance, not yet, but the beginning of something real. Again. The headlines called it the wedding of the year, Monaco, late spring, a private cliffside chapel overlooking the Mediterranean. 50 guests. No press inside, but enough paparazzi on the water to make the ceremony front-page news. Tian Ro wore black. No boutonniere, no vows, just a statement of intent. Raina Lennox, now Raina Ro, wore Dior. Off-shoulder ivory, minimal jewelry, and a veil long enough to drape down 3 marble steps. They didn't kiss for long, just enough for the photos. It wasn't a love story. It was a merger. 2 months earlier, Xian buried his father, the man who taught him code, chess, and how to be invisible until you win. A man who lived by rules. Clean rooms, clean reputations, and no public drama. The funeral was silent. No eulogy. Just Xian standing next to a closed casket, eyes hollow. He didn't cry, but when the will was read and the company's shares transferred, everything changed. Overnight, Tian Ro became one of the most powerful men in tech, and one of the most vulnerable. The board liked his mind. They didn't like his personal life. No family, no spouse, no long-term partner, no stability. They said it behind closed doors. "He's brilliant, but reckless, too private, no family roots, could spook investors. Is he reliable long-term?" It wasn't about romance. It was about optics, legacy, insurance. So Tian did what all brilliant strategic men do when they want to keep control. He solved the problem. Raina Lennox was perfect on paper. She had the right last name. Her family had 3 generations of clean, respectable public service in DC. Her father was a retired diplomat. Her mother sat on 4 charity boards. Raina herself had a law degree she never used and a talent for navigating social spaces like a seasoned actress. She didn't need love. She needed relevance. So when Tian's team reached out with an offer, dinner, just to talk, she knew what it meant. And she said yes. They met at a private rooftop lounge in San Francisco. No paparazzi, no staff. He poured her a drink himself. They talked numbers, image, lifestyle boundaries. They discussed privacy terms, and they both agreed, no illusions. "Do you want children?" he asked. "No, Public appearances? When needed. I can handle press. You won't have to worry. What do you want in return? Access, travel, autonomy. I'll never ask you for affection, but I will ask for full visibility in public. He nodded. Deal. The wedding was fast-tracked. 3 weeks later, Tian's board was notified. Settling down. Married a lovely woman. A stabilizing influence. Shares soared. Magazine covers followed. Photos of Raina on yachts. Raina in gowns. Raina and Xian at charity events. Raina smiling behind him at global tech forums. They made sense, even if nothing about it was real. Behind closed doors, their life was quiet. Not cold, not warm, just neutral. Separate bedrooms, coordinated calendars. Once a week, they'd share a silent meal in their penthouse's glass dining room. She'd scroll her phone. He'd review server logs. They never argued. They never kissed. They never tried. Raina understood the assignment. She knew when to appear, when to disappear, what to wear, what to say, when to lean in during a photo. She had no interest in his business, only how it reflected on her. She curated her image ruthlessly. No scandals, no outbursts. She was the ideal partner for a man who didn't want intimacy, just control. But control always has a cost. Tian stopped seeing people, stopped building from instinct. He started outsourcing decisions, started performing for investors, for press, for shareholders, and slowly he stopped recognizing himself. One night, 2 years into their marriage, he stayed late at the office, alone, reviewing a collapsed security protocol. Everyone had gone home, except one name showed up in the logs. Lane Consulting, one of the third-party partners his acquisition team had hired without telling him. He opened the file. Read the code. His chest tightened. It was hers. Seraphine's style was unmistakable. Nested logic patterns, elegant recursion, syntax that read like thought, not just function. He stared at it for 20 minutes, then closed the file. Not then. He wasn't ready. Not to see her, not to admit what he gave up. He went home that night, crawled into his own bed, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. Raina never noticed. Raina adjusted easily to fame. Not the screaming fan kind, but the whispering elite kind. The kind that smiled at charity balls while measuring your ring size, your designer label, your last name. She loved it. Loved being the face of modern billionaire wife. Young, sharp, classically elegant, always seen but never messy. Her photos appeared in Elle Business and Forbes Women Features. She hosted tech galas, rarely mentioned code, and answered every question, with 2 rehearsed smiles, one for curiosity, one for power. Raina didn't need to know how firewalls worked. She just needed to know how to walk into a room and make everyone forget Xian ever lived without her. And Xian? He let her. He stayed behind the scenes, tightening his code, cleaning the company's infrastructure, flying in and out of international contracts with barely a shadow left behind. He barely touched his wedding ring. When asked about married life in interviews, he nodded and said, steady. I'm grateful. He never said happy. He never said home. Sometimes, late at night, Raina would watch him from her end of the penthouse hallway. He always sat at the same desk, lit only by the soft blue light of his screens. Quiet, working, drifting further. She noticed. Of course she did, but she didn't chase him. She wasn't interested in repair. She was interested in results. By the 3rd year, their intimacy had become strategy. Their vacations were photographed, but not enjoyed. Their gifts were expensive but impersonal. Raina bought him a rare timepiece. He gave her an island weekend, flown in and flown out on schedule. They never touched each other without reason. They never asked each other anything they didn't already know. The space between them wasn't hostile. It was hollow. But what no one told Raina was that hollow men remember everything, especially the parts they tried to bury. And Xian couldn't stop remembering Seraphine. How she spoke without decoration. How she disagreed with him. How she showed up even when she didn't have to. It wasn't romanticized. It wasn't nostalgia. It was clarity. Seraphine never smiled for the cameras. She smiled when the code finally worked. She never asked for dresses. She asked for time. One night, Tian opened his old server backups. He found old messages, comments, error logs, her initials, SL, notes left in the code. They were all still there. He sat in the dark for 2 hours reading them. His chest got heavy, because he realized he wasn't in love with a ghost. He was in love with someone real, someone he left behind in exchange for silence, order, and social approval. Raina, meanwhile, was preparing for a panel. Women Behind the Brand, a new initiative she launched to raise her visibility. It was her 6th public appearance that month. Tian didn't attend. She didn't ask. They had grown used to the absence. What she didn't expect was that it would start to feel natural, that she wouldn't miss him, that she wouldn't even look for him anymore. 4 years in, they functioned like executives of a shared firm. They reviewed each other's calendars through assistants. They celebrated anniversaries with photo shoots, not dinners. They smiled when needed, left events separately, and at night, they were strangers in different wings of the same fortress. But in the 5th year, something shifted. Not in the headlines, not in Raina, not even in Seraphine, who hadn't seen him in years. Something shifted in Xian. It started with a name. Her name. In a tech report, buried under a new AI system proposal submitted by an external consultant, he recognized the structure, the clarity, the elegance of function. He blinked. Seraphine Lane. Again, he asked no one. He called no one. He just stared at the screen. And for the first time in years, Xian Ro realized something terrifying. He had everything, but not himself. He had traded who he was for a polished version the world could consume. And now, that version was hollowing out from the inside. That night, he sat at his desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a photo, old, faded, blurry, not of her face, just her handwriting, on a sticky note, years ago. Keep going. You were built for more than applause. He stared at it, then closed the drawer. Have you ever traded something real for something that looked better? Have you ever kept quiet while your heart slowly walked out the door? Tell me in the comments. And if you know someone who's performing instead of living, share this story with them. And if you're still with me, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this story's only getting deeper from here. The first time Seraphine Lane met Xian Ro, she was elbow deep in a broken firewall script at 2:37 a.m. The servers had crashed for the 3rd time that night. She didn't look up when he walked in. She just said, "Don't touch anything." Tian didn't argue. He pulled up a chair beside her. They were working at Axis Core Labs, a startup in Fremont nobody talks about now. Back then, it was 25 people, 2 microwaves, and a whole lot of burned-out ambition. The servers always ran hot. The paychecks didn't always clear. But it was a place full of raw minds, and Seraphine was the one people called when everything started blinking red. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She was the one whose keyboard never stopped moving. Tian had only joined 2 weeks earlier. Quiet, brilliant, a bit tense. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to build. Same as her. They didn't speak much at first, but they noticed things. She noticed he rewrote base code from memory. He noticed she solved things by instinct first, logic second, and she was rarely wrong. That night, they stayed till sunrise. By 5:15 a.m., the system was stable. Tian passed her a lukewarm coffee from the vending machine. She looked at it, took it anyway. "I thought you left hours ago," she said. "I don't leave while things are broken." She nodded once. They didn't start as friends. They started as teammates. 2 minds that respected each other. No small talk, no flirtation, just shared pressure, shared silence, shared fire. And sometimes that's stronger than love. Within 3 months, they ran the night shift together. It wasn't official, but everyone knew. If something went down after hours, call Seraphine and Xian. He once told her, "You debug like you're defusing a bomb." She replied, Maybe I am. He didn't laugh, but his eyes softened, and for someone like him, that meant something. They ate noodles in the break room, left notes on each other's monitors, never romantic, never direct. One day, she found a sticky note that said, "Your patch fixed my mess. I owe you lunch." She didn't respond, just left a note the next day. Pay it forward. Buy the intern coffee. They're drowning. The next day, the intern had coffee waiting on their desk. Tian didn't mention it. Neither did she. But that day, they worked 3 hours without speaking, in sync, side by side, code flowing. He told her things no one else knew, not out loud, but through the way he stayed long after the lights went off, through the way his hands trembled slightly when he checked error logs, through the way he shut down when executives walked in. He once said, "My father told me not to chase applause, just results." She replied, "Applause isn't the problem, it's what happens to people who only build for it." They never kissed, never went on dates, but Seraphine once fell asleep beside him on the server room floor, head resting. Against his shoulder, wrapped in a hoodie, he loaned her without asking. She woke up to find a sticky note on her laptop. "Let yourself rest. You already saved it." She kept that note in her wallet for years. People assumed Tian was the brain behind everything. He didn't correct them. But he never took credit for her work. Internally, he labeled her contributions clearly. He fought to keep her on contract when budgets tightened. He never said, "You owe me." And she never needed thanks. Until things changed. Axis Core folded in year 2. They were overfunded and mismanaged. Leadership cut corners. Security protocols were compromised. Clients bailed. Layoffs hit hard. Seraphine got her notice at 3 p.m. on a Thursday. By 3:07, her badge stopped working. She packed up quietly. No drama, but before she walked out, she slid a folder onto Tian's desk. Inside, 6 months of handwritten diagrams and notes. His eyes scanned them. "You're not emailing this?" She shook her head. "No one listens when I speak. But you will." He looked up at her. "I always have." She nodded once, then left. He didn't see her again for 2 years. Not until everything he built started using code patterns that felt oddly familiar, the kind she used. But back then, he wasn't ready to face what that meant. Because while she had left with silence and dignity, he had stayed and learned how to build without her. Or so he thought. The final weeks at Axis Core felt like a building on fire with the lights still on. Everyone acted like it was business as usual. But people started skipping meetings. Clients stopped responding. The fridge stayed full because nobody trusted a future paycheck enough to go grocery shopping. Seraphine kept coming in. So did Tian. They were the last two still trying to fix things no one else believed in. One night, as backup servers glitched for the 4th time in a week, Seraphine looked up from her screen and said, "They're going to bury this." Tian didn't respond. "They'll blame the collapse on market shifts," she said. But this was leadership, poor planning, sloppy acquisitions. Still, no reply. She stood and walked to the whiteboard, wrote 3 names. "These 3 made every cost-cutting decision that killed us. I tracked it all. You should take this." He looked at the board, then at her. "Why are you still here?" he asked. She wiped her marker hand clean with a napkin. "Because I'm not going to pretend I didn't care just because they stopped." She waited, then added, "Why are you?" He stared at the blinking monitors. "Because I don't know what comes after this." That night, they didn't work. They sat outside on the loading dock. She passed him a bottle of water. No music, no screen glow, just the hum of dying servers inside. "You ever want to build something of your own?" she asked. "I think about it all the time," he said. "So why haven't you?" He turned the cap in his fingers. "Because I'm still trying to fix someone else's mess. Feels like practice. Practice only counts if you leave when it's time." He didn't answer. She didn't push. A week later, her layoff came. No warning, no meeting, just a deactivated keycard and a HR template email. She didn't cry. She didn't even look surprised. She just packed her things, unplugged her work drive, and left 3 files open on her screen. One titled, "What Could Have Worked?" Another, "Security Protocol CXR 2.1. The third, "Goodbye." Tian opened the 3rd file later that night. It read, "Some people wait until it's safe to build, but safe doesn't come. So I'm walking away. If you ever do build something real, I hope you'll build it like it's ours, even if I'm not there." He stared at it until the sun came up. He didn't write back. He didn't call. He heard whispers that she moved across town, started freelancing. Some said she was consulting. Others said she was out of tech completely. He didn't check. He didn't want to know. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He let her leave. Not because he wanted her gone, but because he didn't think he was enough. After Axis Core collapsed, he was recruited by investors who'd seen his work in crisis. They gave him funding, a team, autonomy. He built fast, built quiet, built big. He told himself he was doing it for the mission. But in every line of architecture, in every product launch, in every late-night debug, he looked for her touch and hated that it wasn't there. 2 years later, her name appeared in a proposal draft, hidden in a subcontracting firm. A quiet mention in the code credits. Lane Systems Consulting. It was her. He saw her footprint in the way the variables were structured, in how bugs were anticipated and neutralized before they even appeared. It was signature Seraphine. He closed the file, didn't call, didn't reach out. But for the first time in months, he couldn't sleep. One of his assistants once asked, "Do you want us to bring her in?" He said no, then deleted the message thread. He wasn't ready to admit that his biggest regret wasn't a missed deal. It was a missed life. The day the Astra Award Committee emailed him about the nomination, Cian sat in his office and stared out at the skyline. Everyone expected him to thank his team, his board, his wife, but deep down, he knew the truth. He had never built alone. He had never succeeded without her fingerprints on the first blueprints, and part of him was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of applause that didn't belong to him. He wrote her name on a post-it and stuck it in his drawer, then left the office early. He walked the same Fremont streets where Axis Core used to be. The building was gone, replaced by a glassy fitness startup, but the bench across the street, the one they once sat on sharing vending machine snacks, was still there. He sat on it, closed his eyes, and whispered, "You were right. The 4th quarter wasn't going as planned. International licensing deals were stalling. A new cybersecurity partner pulled out last minute. One of the satellites Cian's firm had quietly invested in went dark, costing millions in recalibrations. The board grew nervous. They didn't say it outright, but every meeting felt like an interrogation. How's the brand holding? Any media leaks we should know about? Can your wife do another public appearance this month? Tian gave them what they wanted, until he couldn't anymore. He sat in his corner office, surrounded by glass walls and skyline, yet feeling more caged than ever. He hadn't touched code in weeks. Everything came filtered through analysts, advisors, PR handlers. Even his words, drafted in statements, scrubbed before release. The only time he felt human was when he shut the door, turned off the lights, and sat alone with archived servers from 5 years ago. Sometimes he pulled up old files Seraphine had worked on. He never opened them to fix anything. He just read her notes, like reading memories in code. Raina walked in one evening while he was still at the office. She didn't knock. She never did. She was dressed in all white, sleek pantsuit, gold accents, camera ready. "We have the Astra Prix to gala dinner next Friday," she said. "I know. They want a speech, something heartfelt, the behind every great man type." He didn't look up. "I'm not doing that." She smiled like he was joking. When he didn't laugh, she adjusted her tone. "You're getting the award, Cian. This is our legacy moment. Don't downplay it." He finally looked at her. "This isn't our legacy." She blinked. "I've been beside you for 5 years. I've cleaned your public image. I've protected your brand. You think that counts for nothing? He stood, walked to the window, then said without turning, "You've been beside the image, not the man." Raina stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "Who are you thinking about when you say that?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She knew, and her eyes narrowed. That night, she didn't go home with him. She left in her own car, called her own driver, and instructed her assistant to clear her calendar for the rest of the week. Tian didn't chase her. He stayed in the office till morning. The next day, his chief technical officer forwarded a project proposal for a new AI stabilization system. One of the sub-consulting partners, Lane Systems. Tian stared at the name for a full minute. The email said she wasn't the lead, just a contributor. Quiet background work. But he recognized the logic path. Even buried under 4 layers of third-party wrappers, he saw her, still working in silence, still holding the system steady, still choosing to be invisible. He forwarded the file to himself, then closed his laptop and made a call. "Tell the Astra committee I'll be submitting a new version of my speech," he told his executive assistant. She sounded confused. "But your wife already reviewed the one we sent." "I'll send my own draft," he said. Click. He didn't tell Raina. He didn't tell anyone. But that night, he opened the desk drawer, pulled out the sticky note she once left on his monitor, and placed it next to the blank page he was about to write on. Then, slowly, he started typing. The night before the gala, Raina stood in front of a full-length mirror wearing the gown she'd had designed 6 months ago, a custom piece meant to shimmer under stage lights. "Do you like it?" she asked. Tian was buttoning his shirt across the room. "It's fine," he said without looking. She turned to face him. "We're going to own the room tomorrow." He didn't respond. She walked over, placed her hands on his chest, leaned in like she used to. He didn't move. She stepped back. "You're somewhere else," she said quietly. Still no answer. Then, "Do you remember what I wore the day we signed the marriage agreement?" He shook his head. She smiled bitterly. "I do, because I was signing a contract, and you were already in love with someone else." He met her eyes. "I didn't know what I was losing yet." She nodded once, and walked out. The morning of the Astra Gala started quiet. No interviews, no rehearsals, no press alerts yet. Just the hum of filtered sunlight through the penthouse windows and the sound of Raina's heels tapping across polished floors. Tian sat at the edge of the dining table, not eating. He hadn't slept. The final speech sat in his jacket pocket. He had read it 6 times. Changed nothing. The truth was already written. Now, it just needed to be spoken. Raina walked past him with a robe tied high and a phone glued to her hand. "I'm confirming the driver for 4:30. Dinner with the committee is at 5. Red carpet opens at 6. You'll walk behind me, pause for 3 photos, then meet me at the main platform." Tian didn't respond. She kept talking. "Your stylist left cufflinks in the second drawer. Don't forget the watch. And please don't vanish tonight. If you need air, wait until after the speech." He turned slightly. "Did you ever wonder what it would have felt like, if it were real?" She paused, then said without looking up, "I stopped wondering when I realized we never wanted the same version of real." The drive to the Avalon Grand was silent. Cameras were already waiting at the gates. Paparazzi lined the sidewalks. Drones buzzed overhead. The car slowed. Raina adjusted her makeup, lifted her chin, slipped on her practiced smile. Tian watched through tinted glass. All the lights, all the angles. It felt like a set, not a moment. Inside, the ballroom was a mirror of perfection. Black velvet tables, gold fixtures, white orchid centerpieces imported from Taiwan. Everything was polished, curated, timed to the second. It looked like power. But Tian felt none of it. They were separated on arrival, as planned. Raina did the photo line. Tian went backstage. He stood in the prep hallway with 3 other honorees, all of whom greeted him politely, none of whom dared ask why his tie wasn't straight or why his hands were clenched at his sides. He didn't hear their speeches, didn't watch the montage. All he heard was the name in his pocket. Seraphine Lane, still written in his own handwriting, circled at the top of the page. The organizer touched his shoulder. "You're up next." He nodded, stepped forward, took the envelope, walked up the back stairs, and stopped behind the curtain. He could hear the host wrapping up. And now, the final award of the evening. A man whose impact reshaped cybersecurity across the globe. Please welcome Mr. Cian Rowe. Applause. Spotlights. Tian walked out. His shoes didn't echo. The carpet was too thick, but he felt every step like glass underfoot. He reached the podium, looked out. Raina sat in the front row. Gold dress, calm face, perfect posture. A camera panned to her. She smiled right on cue, waiting for her moment, waiting to be crowned the woman behind it all. He looked past her, to the back row, where a woman in navy blue sat perfectly still, hands in her lap, trying not to exist. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She didn't expect anything. But she came anyway. He took a breath, then began. Tian didn't look at the teleprompter. He looked down at his paper once, folded it, and tucked it in his jacket. Then he placed both hands on the podium. "I was told tonight is about legacy," he said. The room fell silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect. The kind that comes from not knowing where this is going. He took a breath. "My work has reached 6 continents. It's protected hospitals, governments, banks. It has secured lives you'll never see. That kind of work doesn't happen because of one person, or one moment, or one name." He paused. "You've heard the titles, the founder, the architect, the innovator. But none of that started with me." Raina's smile tightened. Cameras zoomed in. Tian scanned the room, found the one face that wasn't blinking. "Seraphine," he continued. "It started years ago, in a basement, with a system on fire. And one woman beside me who didn't leave. People shifted in their seats. Every blueprint I've ever drawn, every pattern I've ever caught, every solution I've scaled, was built on the way she sees the world." A murmur in the crowd. Raina's jaw moved slightly. Not a flinch. A click. Tian looked directly at her now. "She taught me to see patterns before chaos, to trust logic over ego. And when the world wanted shine, she chose silence. Then, finally, the woman behind my success is Seraphine Lane." Gasps, not loud, but sharp, like the sound of air being punched out of 100 lungs. Cameras turned, spotlights searched, and there she was, back row, still, alone. Seraphine didn't react. No tears, no smile. Just the weight of 100 eyes trying to make her real. Raina didn't move. She kept her eyes on the stage. Her smile never dropped. But something behind it collapsed. It was in her hands, too still. Her posture, too upright. Her silence, too complete. A journalist near the aisle whispered, "That's not his wife." A photographer beside him said, "Who is she?" Tian finished the speech without a single stumble. He thanked no one else. He didn't acknowledge Raina. He didn't even stay to pose with the plaque. He walked off stage and handed the award to a stunned assistant. "I don't need that," he said, and walked straight past the press line. Raina stood, not rushed, not flustered. She nodded to the presenter, mouthed "excuse me," and stepped away from the table with grace so sharp it could cut steel. She walked out of the ballroom, down the hallway, into the back stairwell, and when the door clicked shut behind her, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 5 years. Then she reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone, and sent one message. "We're done." Back inside, guests whispered over flutes of champagne and untouched desserts. The board sat stunned. Sponsors looked at each other, and in the far corner, a woman with a lanyard badge and a plain navy dress slipped quietly out the side door. She didn't want an encore. She just wanted the night to end. The door to Seraphine's townhome closed with a soft click. She leaned her back against it, dropped her keys in the bowl, and let the silence settle. The heels she wore were still on. Her badge was still around her neck. She hadn't moved since walking in. She didn't know why she went to the gala. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure. She didn't expect him to say her name. Not in front of everyone. Not like that. Not after 5 years of silence. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of notifications, mentions, tags, screenshots of her face. She turned it off, slipped it into a drawer, boiled water for tea, but forgot the tea bag. She sat on the couch, hands around an empty mug, heart steady but not calm. She wasn't angry. She wasn't flattered. She was tired. Across town, Raina stood in the penthouse with the lights off. The city glowed beneath the glass walls. Her dress shimmered faintly in the reflection. She hadn't changed, hadn't removed her makeup. She walked barefoot into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and pulled out a crystal decanter she didn't even like, then threw it against the wall. It shattered on impact. Whiskey soaked into the marble. Shards skidded under the island. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just whispered, "You picked her," then turned, walked to the bar cart, and poured something else. Tian didn't come home. He didn't go to a hotel. He didn't answer texts from his assistant, his board, or the press. He walked to the old part of town, past buildings that used to mean something, past corners where his ideas were first scribbled onto napkins, past the apartment where he once fixed a server from a fold-out couch, and then he stopped. Outside Seraphine's house, lights on, curtains closed. He didn't knock, not yet. He stood there for 5 minutes, watching the stillness, then turned, walked back to the sidewalk, and sat on the curb. Seraphine saw the figure from her upstairs window. At first she thought it was a delivery driver or a lost neighbor, but then she knew he wasn't moving. She didn't open the door. She just watched. He sat there for 20 minutes, then stood. He didn't knock. Raina woke the next morning before the press did. She contacted her legal team, froze the joint accounts, initiated a full audit. She didn't confront him. She didn't file publicly. Not yet. She wanted to see everything first, what he'd hidden, who had helped him. She didn't want revenge. She wanted precision. Tian showed up at his office the next morning in jeans and a wrinkled button-down. No security detail. No driver. He walked in through the lobby, like he didn't own the building, because for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he did. The receptionist stared, but no one stopped him. He rode the elevator in silence, stepped into his office, and sat down at his desk like it was his first day again. The air felt different, clean, unfiltered. He opened his laptop, pulled up a blank document, wrote one line. I said her name because it was always hers, then closed it. He wasn't sure if it was a letter, a journal entry, or the beginning of something else. He just knew it was true. By noon, half the board had texted. His phone stayed face down. The story was already in the news. Blogs had picked it up. Tech insiders were dissecting it. Even gossip sites were speculating. The woman behind the billionaire. Qianro breaks script at gala. Wife absent after shock speech. None of the articles mentioned Seraphine's face clearly, just blurry shots of her in the shadows. She didn't care. She didn't respond. She made tea this time, remembered the tea bag, and sat at her desk to work. Her inbox was flooded. Project offers, interview requests, consulting inquiries. She archived all of it, except one. A message from Tian's old CTO. It said, "Some of us always knew it was you." Tian stood in front of Seraphine's door again. Same sidewalk, same porch light, same hesitation. But this time, he knocked. Not loud, not rushed. Once, then twice. The door opened after a few seconds. She didn't look surprised. "Hi," he said, voice low. She nodded. "You're early. For what?" "For whatever this is." She stepped aside. He walked in. The air inside was warm, still, familiar. No scent of expensive candles or designer furniture. Just soap, tea, and wood polish. She poured him a cup without asking. Same as last time. Only this time, He brought something too, a file folder. He placed it on the table between them. "What's that?" she asked. He pushed it forward. "Every piece of work you ever touched for me, every blueprint, every reference, every closed source patch." Her eyes narrowed. "I kept track. Even when I wasn't saying your name." She opened it, slowly. Page after page of evidence. Proof that she mattered, even when the world didn't see it. She closed the folder. "I didn't come to the gala for recognition," she said. "I know. I came to see if you'd finally stop pretending." He looked at her, quiet, then said, "I stopped pretending the day I wrote that speech." She didn't smile, didn't flinch, just sipped her tea. "You're not here to rebuild the past," she said. "No, you're not here because you're lonely." "No, then why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "I'm here because I remembered who I was when I was with you, and I realized I miss that man more than I miss anything else." Silence, not uncomfortable, not final. Across the city, Raina sat with a publicist in a private suite at a luxury hotel. She was dressed in soft grays now, no shimmer, no flash. She held a glass of still water and a copy of her next speech. The press release was ready. Mrs. Rowe to launch Women in Power Foundation, a graceful pivot, a controlled narrative. The press wouldn't paint her as betrayed. They'd paint her as evolved. She'd show up in headlines, not as the abandoned wife, but as the voice of resilience. The publicist read the copy out loud. Raina listened, eyes half focused on the skyline outside the suite. Then she spoke, calmly. Take out the word healing, add refocus. "I'm not a victim, I'm an architect too." The publicist nodded and edited. Later that night, she posted her first personal message in months. Simple, direct, strategically vague. "Life evolves. So do we. I choose peace and progress. Thank you for the support. More soon." In 20 minutes, it had over 60,000 likes. In 2 hours, 12,000 comments. She didn't reply to any of them. She just watched and waited. Back in Seraphine's home, Tian still sat at the same table. The tea was finished. The file folder was closed. "I'm not asking you to come back," he said. "I know. I'm not asking you to fix me." "Good. I'm asking if we could talk." Without the shadows this time, Seraphine leaned back in her chair. "You want to talk?" "Yes. About what?" "Everything." She studied him. "Then, finally, start with the day you stopped being honest." He nodded and started talking. He didn't talk like a man giving a speech. He talked like someone remembering what broke him, not all at once but piece by piece. Tian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes on the floor. "It started the day the investors gave me control. They handed me money, titles and rules, all in one breath." Seraphine didn't interrupt. "I remember thinking, I've made it. But they didn't want me. They wanted the image of someone like me. Someone already shaped, already polished." She stayed silent, and I wanted to keep it. The funding, the seat, the press. I thought if I kept delivering, I could buy time. I could come back for you later. He finally looked up. But later doesn't always wait. Seraphine held the mug in both hands. Steam rising, her face unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me then?" she asked. "Because I thought I could outgrow it. I thought success would fill the space you left." "Did it?" He shook his head. "It made it worse." She exhaled. "So what now?" "I don't want to rewrite the past." "Good. Because I wouldn't let you. I want to build something cleaner this time, even if it's not together." Her brow lifted slightly. "Cleaner?" He slid another folder across the table. "Company shares. A new venture proposal. Not co-signed. Just named. Lane Systems Architecture." Her name. Not his. She looked at the offer, then at him. "You think I'll trust you just because you remembered what I'm worth?" "No. I think you'll decide based on what you're building now, not what we had before." "Smart," she said, folding the paper. Then, "But I don't owe you anything." He nodded. I know. I'm not your second draft. You were always the first. I was just too afraid to say it. Her expression didn't soften, but she didn't shut the folder either. She let it sit on the table, then said, "If we talk again, it won't be here. It'll be on neutral ground. You'll come as yourself, not as a man looking to erase 5 years of silence." He nodded, stood, walked to the door, then paused. "I don't expect you to trust me, but I'm not hiding anymore." Then he left. At 9:42 p.m., Rayner sent the email that started the real damage. Subject line, "Internal irregularities. Immediate review requested." Attached, 8 years of expense audits, transfer logs, unapproved side entity, investments, some of which looped back to Seraphine's prior consulting firm. The recipient, she didn't send it out of spite. She sent it because control had slipped. The image was cracked, and she was never the type to accept cracks. The board called an emergency meeting, not with Tian, without him. By midnight, an internal investigation had been ordered. His CFO texted him 3 times. No reply. His chief counsel left a voicemail. Tian didn't listen. He was sitting in a parking lot, watching steam rise from his coffee, wondering what it would have felt like if he had made one different decision 5 years ago. Seraphine stayed up reviewing the proposal. She didn't look at the offer numbers, not yet. She looked at the name. Her name. Front, center, no footnote, no silent partner tag. Just her. She didn't smile. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. Have you ever stayed quiet while someone else claimed your work, or watched the truth come too late to fix what you lost? If this moment hit you, if you've ever been the person behind someone else's spotlight, drop a comment. Let them know you were never invisible. And if you're here for the slow burn, the silent power, and the kind of justice that doesn't need noise, subscribe. The next chapter, everything breaks. The board meeting wasn't scheduled. It was summoned. Tian walked in expecting discussion. He got silence. 10 chairs. 1 long table. No handshakes. Just printed packets already opened, red ink annotations along the margins. They didn't start with small talk. They started with numbers. A legal advisor read from the document, overlapping third-party consulting engagements with prior affiliations, undisclosed subcontracting through lane systems, recurring vendor names appearing across protected asset allocations. Tian didn't blink, but his fingers flexed slightly against the armrest. A second board member added, "This creates an optics problem, Tian, and not a small one." Then came the real line. "Was your wife aware of any of this?" He leaned forward. "She's not my advisor. She was my accessory." A pause. "And you said was..." They didn't fire him. They couldn't. But they didn't defend him either. They recommended stepping back from public-facing leadership until internal reviews concluded, which meant disappear or we'll bury you. He stood, thanked them for their time, and left. No argument, just quiet fury. Meanwhile, Rayner sat in her spa suite, fingers dipped in rose water, a small monitor, on the side showing every news outlet that had picked up her statement. She was being praised, graceful, empowered, reclaiming her voice. She smiled faintly, then made another call. Move forward with the asset locks and prepare the separation announcement, but not yet. Let them bleed first. Seraphine wasn't watching the news. She was reading comments on message boards, on tech blogs, in the anonymous threads. Who is she? She was just a consultant, probably slept her way into the credit. She doesn't even have a LinkedIn. She closed the browser, logged out, then deleted the tab. Later that afternoon she got the call she didn't want, a reporter. Somehow, they had her number, wanted a statement. She said nothing, hung up, then blocked the number, then the next, then the next. At 4:17 p.m. her front door rang. She opened it, expecting a courier. Instead, she found Tian. Again, but this time, he looked different. No jacket, tie loose. A man who had just been told the version of himself they once paid to polish wasn't worth keeping around anymore. She didn't say anything. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, "They're coming for you now." She folded her arms. "I figured, I'll take it all publicly. They already believe what they want." "I'll prove it." She held his gaze. "You can't undo the way you built the first version of your story. I can build the next one on truth." She stepped aside, let him in, but made no promises. Seraphine didn't offer him tea this time. She sat across from him, arms crossed, back straight. "You said you'd take it all publicly," she said. "I want to hear what that looks like." Tian didn't hesitate. "I'll call a press conference. Admit full responsibility. Say your firm was brought in by me directly. I'll say I failed to disclose the connection, but the work was clean. And they'll believe that? No. But I'll say it anyway." She leaned forward. "You don't get to martyr yourself to feel better." He met her eyes. "This isn't about feeling better. It's about pulling you out of the line of fire." She paused, then asked, "What do you want from me, Cian?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Not a deal, not a second chance. Just truth, out loud, without leaving you behind this time." She didn't reply, but her silence didn't sound like rejection. That night, Seraphine finally answered one email, not from the press, not from investors, from a junior systems analyst she once mentored quietly in a side project. The message said, "They say you're the ghost in the machine. I always knew." She didn't respond, but she smiled. Once. Tian held the press conference the next morning. Short, controlled, no spin doctors. He stood alone. No wife, no legal team. Just a man at a podium. "Everything I built came from work done in dark rooms by quiet minds." Seraphine Lane was one of those minds, and her name should have always been beside mine, not beneath it. Reporters asked questions. He didn't flinch. He took the blame. He clarified the timelines. He refused to make her his defense. Back in her home, Seraphine watched the stream on mute. Not because she didn't want to hear it, because she already knew what it said. The words weren't hers. But for the first time, the consequences were, and across the city, Raina sat with her media strategist. New headlines were already rolling. Billionaire claims emotional truth behind consultant involvement. Rowe admits relationship with shadow contributor. Raina read them all, then handed her strategist a single photo. Old, black and white. Tian, at a boardroom table, not with her, with Seraphine, from the Axis Core years. "We leak this," Raina said. "Then we frame it as a betrayal narrative. He used my image while building something real with her. They'll eat it up." Her strategist hesitated. It might backfire. It could make her look like the one who was silenced. Raina's smile was faint. "That's fine. As long as I look like the one who was used." The photo dropped at 9:02 a.m., posted by an anonymous account, amplified within minutes, then picked up by 2 business blogs, 3 gossip outlets, and a tech news site by noon. A grainy black and white frame. Tian, younger, sleeves rolled, eyes focused, mid-discussion with a woman the public now recognized. The caption wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. They go way back. That was enough. By afternoon, the story had spread. The woman behind his success was always there, but hidden. Board questions, executive ties to former employee turned partner. Was the wife a cover for the real connection? Some headlines defended Seraphine. Most didn't. The internet has never needed context to form a narrative. She got 10 calls in 1 hour. Emails offering speaking engagements, panel invitations, a profile piece from Business Week. One of them asked if she'd pose for a feature called The Invisible Women of Tech. She didn't answer. She turned her phone off, but not her laptop. Not this time. She opened her old files. The original build notes from Axis Core, the proposals she submitted under other people's names, the buried contributions, the ones she never bothered to dispute. And this time, she did something she had never done before. She made a new file, titled it Version Visible. Across the city, Tian was already facing fallout. The board was split. Some saw him as reckless. Others saw the reaction as human. But investors weren't emotional. They were cautious. 3 pulled back from a pending merger. 1 issued a statement. Trust is critical. Our capital follows structure. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He sat in the dark conference room after everyone left and stared at the glass wall, the one that still had a sticky note taped inside his drawer behind it. Keep going. You were built for more than applause. He didn't need applause anymore, but he wanted peace. Raina's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The leak had gone further than expected. Instead of turning Seraphine into a threat, it turned her into a symbol. Women began commenting under every article. She worked in the shadows while they posed for cameras. She didn't need a spotlight to be valuable. She's who we all are, quietly holding it together. It wasn't scandal. It was movement. And Raina wasn't in the center of it. For the first time, the spotlight didn't want her. By nightfall, Seraphine made her move. Not loud, not performative. Just a post. Plain white background. Black text. No hashtags. No links. I didn't ask for a stage, but if I'm on one, I'll tell the truth. You don't have to scream to build something that lasts. It went viral because the loudest message was calm. The next morning, Seraphine woke to a full inbox. But one email stood out. Subject line: Keynote invitation, Future Code Summit NYC, the most prestigious tech summit of the year. Not a panel, not a background feature. A keynote, 15 minutes. Full solo slot. Prime time. They didn't want her as the woman behind a man. They wanted her. She sat at her desk. The cursor blinked. She didn't respond right away. She thought about what it meant. Her name on a banner, her voice amplified beyond the codebase. She had always told herself real builders didn't need a spotlight. But maybe some spotlights weren't performance. Maybe they were power. When wielded right, Tian didn't call her. He showed up, not unannounced. He texted first, standing outside. No agenda. She opened the door. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man learning how to be quiet in the right ways. I saw the keynote invite, he said. She nodded. They want me because of you, she replied. No, he said. They want you because I finally stopped standing in the way. She studied him, then stepped aside. Inside, he didn't ask to sit. He waited. She walked to the kitchen. No tea this time, just water and stillness. They're going to keep coming, he said. Offers, headlines, invitations. You don't owe anyone an explanation. I know. But if you want backup, I'm not behind you this time. I'll stand beside you. She leaned against the counter. You say that now. I said it the night I left the stage. I just hadn't earned it yet. She didn't smile. But her silence didn't shut the door either. Meanwhile, Raina met with a private investigator, not for gossip, for leverage. She had no interest in dragging her name into the mud. She wanted something cleaner, something final, something that would make Xian remember why he chose her in the first place. Not for love, but for how sharp she was when she needed to be. She handed over a file. I want everything he built while married to me. Track the IPs, the accounts. I want to know if he gave her access to anything tied to our name. The investigator nodded. Discreet, quiet, ruthless. Exactly what she needed. Later that evening, Seraphine sat alone with her laptop, cursor blinking again. She didn't type yet. She just reread the invitation. And beneath the line about stage lighting and press access, one sentence stood out. We want your mind and your story. That's what changed everything. They didn't want her to explain Tian. They wanted her to explain herself. She opened a new document, typed 3 words. I built quietly, then stopped. Not because she didn't have more to say, because she finally knew where to start. The ballroom at the Hudson Grand was filled wall to wall. Tech executives, journalists, government analysts, startups trying to survive, giants trying to stay relevant. Everyone was there for one reason: to hear Seraphine Lane. She stood backstage in a simple charcoal suit. No stylists, no handlers, no PR team rehearsing her lines. Just her, and her story. The coordinator whispered, "We're ready for you." She nodded, stepped forward, and walked onto a stage that was never designed for someone like her. Not because she didn't belong there, but because no one ever thought to ask her. Until now. No slides, no hype music, just a mic, a quiet pause, and her voice. "I was never the face of anything," she said. "But I was in the room every time it almost fell apart. The room was still. I've written lines of code that held up emergency systems. Designed frameworks that never failed once. Some of you used them. You didn't know my name. That's fine." She took a breath. "But lately, my name's been said a lot. Mostly by people who never heard it until it became newsworthy." Soft murmurs. "I'm not here to defend anything. I'm here to remind you that the people who build what works aren't always the people you see in the photos." Pause. "And sometimes the biggest betrayal isn't being erased. It's being remembered only when it benefits someone else." Tian sat in the second row. No tie, no cameras on him. He didn't blink once. Seraphine continued, "I'm not interested in being inspirational. I'm interested in building systems that don't break when the world leans on them." She gestured toward the crowd. "If that's you too, whether or not your name is known, keep building. Eventually they'll notice they were leaning on your work the whole time." She stepped back, didn't wait for applause, but it came anyway. A standing ovation. One that didn't come because of who she loved, but because of what she proved. Raina wasn't watching the live stream. She was sitting across from the private investigator she hired. He placed a folder on the table. No commentary, no headline, just evidence. Digital log trails, system access dates, and one line that made her pulse still. Private equity structure filed using post-marital revenue under Cyan Row Holdings. A transfer, small, but real, linked to the same firm name Seraphine now led. She stared at the page, didn't react, didn't blink, then closed the folder. "Perfect," she said. "I'll handle it from here." 3 days after the keynote, Seraphine was everywhere. Clips from her speech topped every business feed. Tech panels invited her to lead the conversation. Writers called her the voice behind the next shift in power. But she didn't bask in it. She kept her circle tight. She met with a small legal team, declined photo shoots, rejected 5 podcast interviews. The one message she did answer: a handwritten note left at her front door. "If you ever want to talk, no agenda, no stage, Tian, no signature. Just the same handwriting he used years ago." She tucked it between her laptop and notebook. Didn't text him, but didn't throw it away. Tian was quiet. No more press, no more statements. He spent his days working behind the scenes, not at the empire he built, but at a smaller firm he once helped fund before the board stripped his voting power. He didn't fight back. He let the silence grow. Because for once, it wasn't about controlling the outcome. It was about living with the cost. Then came the letter. Stamped, hand-delivered. Roe v. Roe. Notice of breach and claim of damages. Filed by Raina's attorneys. 28 pages. Clean, clinical, ruthless. In the middle of page 9, improper transfer of post-marital financial assets into an entity co-managed with a non-spousal partner. It didn't accuse Seraphine of theft. It didn't use her name at all. But the implication was clear. Raina had waited, let him fall, let him bleed, then struck when he tried to rebuild. Tian read the document once, then again. The number she was seeking? 7 figures. Not because she needed it, because she knew it would cut. Because she wanted the world to watch Seraphine's name appear next to a dollar sign and question what she'd earned. Seraphine got the email that same afternoon. A quiet note from Cian's attorney. A warning, not a threat, just transparency. "We're being sued. You're not named, but it's about you." She read it once, then closed her laptop. She didn't panic, didn't spiral. She sat still, then called her own lawyer. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm not erasing anything. But I want you to prepare. Because the next move won't be mine." Across town, Raina sat with a chilled glass of white wine and watched a new headline roll across the ticker. Tian Ro faces legal fire from estranged wife over hidden transfers. The word hidden mattered. It didn't have to be true. It just had to be believable. She didn't want him ruined. She wanted him stalled. So that when Seraphine rose, people would hesitate. Hesitate before hiring her. Hesitate before trusting her. That's all it took. Doubt. And Raina had learned power didn't come from volume. It came from pause. Seraphine didn't reply publicly. Not to the headlines. Not to the speculation. Not to the source close to the matter whisper campaigns. She did something quieter. She filed a formal declaration that Lane Systems was independently established, funded, from prior consulting income before any current partnerships began. It wasn't a defense. It was documentation, clean, unbothered. Truth, notarized. Her lawyer warned her, "This doesn't erase the narrative. It only controls the facts." "I don't care about the narrative," she said. "I care about not disappearing again." He nodded and filed it before sunset. Tian got a call from his attorney. "We can settle, but it'll require dissolving all shared asset links, including your investment in Seraphine's firm." He paused, then said, "Do it." The lawyer hesitated. "You'd lose ownership." Tian replied, "Good. I was never supposed to own it." By the next morning, Raina's team received notice. The assets had been pulled from Tian's name. No co-ownership, no spousal trail. Nothing left to hold. Raina stared at the document. She wasn't angry. She was confused. She had expected a fight, expected him to protect the one thing he had left. Instead, he let it go. Tian showed up at Seraphine's place 2 nights later. He didn't knock. He texted, "Can I wait outside? I won't stay long." She opened the door after 2 minutes. He stood with a folder, laid it in her hands. Inside, confirmation of full release of all claim to her business. "You're free of me now," he said. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at him. "Is that what you came to say?" He shook his head. "I came to tell you that even without ownership, without stake, without title, I'm still here. If you want me." A beat of silence. Then she asked, "Why now?" And his answer was the same as it was that night on the couch. "Because I finally remembered the version of me that mattered." She didn't pull him inside, but she didn't close the door either. She let him stand there, and in the stillness of that space, not romantic, not dramatic, just real, something settled. Not forgiveness, but forward. Raina gave one final interview. She chose a luxury magazine known for glossy spreads and elegant tragedy. She wore soft grey again, spoke calmly, said she and Tian grew in different directions, didn't mention Seraphine's name, but said, "Some men only realize what they had when the lights fade. I've simply chosen to keep my own light on." It was well received, graceful, polished, a fitting close. But what she didn't expect was that the next week, Forbes Tech named Seraphine Lane in their cover story, the woman who outbuilt the noise. It rained the morning Seraphine launched her new initiative. Not a company, not a product, a trust, specifically for under-recognized system designers, contract coders, and engineers who'd built in the background for years with no visibility, no equity, no legacy. She named it the first line, because in every build, someone has to write the first line of code. Usually, that person's name gets lost. Not anymore. She didn't hold a press event. She sent a single email to a few close circles. The story caught anyway. Because real things don't need fireworks. Just proof. Tian sat at the back of the small launch room, uninvited, unphotographed. Seraphine knew he was there. She didn't acknowledge him during the speech. She didn't need to. The people in that room knew what they were watching. A woman who had once been hidden, now standing exactly where she always should have been. Not beside someone, but in her own place. And he was exactly where he needed to be too, not claiming credit, not holding shares, just being there. After the event, they stood near the coat rack. No one around. He said, "You didn't mention me." She said, "I didn't need to." A pause. Then, "You okay with that?" He nodded. "Yeah, it's good to be unnecessary." She smiled once. Small. Soft. "You're not unnecessary," she said. "You're just not required for me to rise." They didn't go to dinner. Didn't walk into the rain together. They went their own ways. But something stayed different. Not romantic. Not fragile. Just right. Raina's foundation did well. She got her own spotlight. Not for the scandal, not for the speech, but for the work she did after. Quietly funding female law grads. Writing essays on identity. Building herself into something separate from the image she once married. And Sian? He didn't rebuild a billion-dollar empire. He worked as a private architect for data privacy non-profits. One of the internal systems he built carried no label, no credit, but it worked better than anything the commercial firms offered. He got a thank you card once. Typed, signed, team. He pinned it to his fridge. That was enough. One morning, months later, Seraphine opened a new shipment of servers for a global education security platform she was now leading. Inside the welcome package was a tiny sticky note. Not hers, not his handwriting either. Just typed, "First line secured, keep going. You." She smiled, folded the note once, and taped it above her screen. What does it mean to build someone's empire and be forgotten? What does it mean to love someone enough to let them go and still be the reason they win? If you've ever been the silent partner, the one who taught, lifted, stayed up late, and then watched someone else take the credit, this story is yours. Because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't noise. It's becoming undeniable. It's walking away with dignity. It's being the reason someone finally sees the truth and chooses better. So tell me, have you ever been Seraphine? Have you ever built quietly while someone else stood in the spotlight? Drop your story in the comments. Here on Mr. Charles Stories, we don't just tell love stories. We tell the truth behind them, the sacrifices, the silence, the ones who were never thanked, but never stopped building. So if you believe in justice that doesn't need volume, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had to prove your worth without asking permission, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded they were never invisible. Because here on Mr. Charles Stories, we see you, always.